Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. IRS extends July 15th other upcoming deadlines for tornado victims in parts of the South, provides other relief. IR 2020-126, June 23, 2020, Washington. Victims of the April tornadoes survived storms and flooding that took place in parts of Mississippi, Tennessee, South Carolina will have until October 15, 2020 to file various individuals and business tax returns and make tax payments, the Internal Revenue Service announced today. The IRS is offering this relief to any area designated by the Federal Emergency Agency, FEMA, there's a link to FEMA here, as qualifying for individual assistance. Currently, this includes Clarke, Covington, Grenada, Jasper, Jefferson, Davis, Jones, Lawrence, Panola and Walthall counties in Mississippi, Bradley and Hamilton counties in Tennessee, and Aiken, Barnwell, Berkeley, Colleton, Hampton, Marlboro, Oconee, Orangeburg, and Pickens counties in South Carolina. Taxpayers in localities added later to the disaster area will automatically receive the same filing and payment relief. The current list of eligible localities is always available on the disaster relief page on irs.gov. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description. The tax relief postpones various tax filings and payment deadlines that occurred starting on April 12th. As a result, affected individuals and businesses will have until October 15, 2020 to file returns and pay taxes that were originally due during this period. This includes 2019 individual and business returns that, due to COVID-19, were due on July 15th. Among other things, this also means that affected taxpayers will have until October 15th to make 2019 IRA contributions. So that's a big thing too, because generally the IRA contributions are going to be due when the tax return is due, and now these tax deadlines are being pushed out. So that will affect the IRA deadline as well, it appears. Back to the text. The October 15th deadline also applies to estimated tax payments for the first two quarters of 2020 that were due on July 15th, and the third quarter estimated tax payment normally due on September 15th. It also includes quarterly payroll and excess tax returns normally due on April 30th and July 31st. So those quarterly payments, typically if you're a Schedule C business, if you have your own business or something like that, then you kind of make your payments throughout the year for the current 2020 year, which you're going to be paying your taxes on in 2021. And so this could push out some of the deadlines for the quarterly payments as well. Remember, with those quarterly payments, it's really just a delay that happens. It's a deferral of when you have to pay, which is nice, but you're still going to have to pay it. What you're going to be not having to deal with then by delaying the payment is to not have the penalties and interest, or at least not the penalties that would generally be assigned if you did not pay on the quarterly basis. So keep that in mind. This is a pushing out of the deadlines. Doesn't mean it's not the pushing of the deadline out doesn't mean the taxes for 2020 will go down, but you won't have the penalties related to the late filings that you would typically have if you had to pay them throughout the year in a quarterly basis. And again, that typically will apply to people that have businesses, not people that have W-2 employees, because you'll just get the withholdings taken out of your paycheck as you go back to the text. In addition, penalties on payroll and excess tax deposits due on or after April 12th and before April 27th will be abated as long as the deposits were made by April 27th. The IRS Disaster Relief page has details on other return payments and tax-related actions qualifying for the additional time. The IRS automatically provides filing and payment relief to any taxpayer with an IRS address of record located in the disaster area. Therefore, taxpayers do not need to contact the agency to get this relief. However, if an affected taxpayer receives a late filing or late payment penalty notice from the IRS that has an original or extended filing, payment, or deposit due date, filing within the postponement period, the taxpayer should call the number on the notice to have the penalty abated. So in other words, if they give you a letter saying that you got a penalty related to the late filing and this applies to you and the date should have been extended, then it should have been done automatically, of course. Then you shouldn't get a letter for that and everything should be okay. The deadline should be extended and you shouldn't need to do anything. You shouldn't need to contact the IRS. But if the IRS sends you a letter that applies to this, which would typically be something like, you have a late payment and here's the payment penalties for it, then your goal is you still might have, if it's an estimated payment or something like that, you still might owe the payment, but you want to call the IRS and look into the fact that you may not need the penalty. The penalty is the thing that you may be able to remove, and that's often the case when you're looking at these types of things with the IRS. You may be able to negotiate the penalty or see if the penalty is applying. If the tax is due, the tax is due. It is what it is oftentimes, unless there's an error in the tax calculation. But oftentimes you're looking at whether the penalty applies. So that's the case here typically for these delays or pushing out of the deadlines. Back to the text. In addition, the IRS will work with any taxpayer who lives outside the disaster area but whose records necessarily meet a deadline occurring during the postponement period are located in the affected area. This also includes workers assisting the relief activities who are affiliated with a recognized government or philanthropic organization. Taxpayers qualifying for relief who live outside the disaster area need to contact the IRS at, there's a number here, I'll read it off, but there's a link to that here and a number in here. There'll be a link to this in the description. 866-562-5227, 866-562-5227, once normal operations resume. So obviously the IRS is still somewhat restricted, but there's the number that should. Back to the text. For information on services currently available from the IRS, visit IRS Operations and Services. There's a link to this here page on the irs.gov/coronavirus. There's a link to that here as well. Individual and businesses in a federally declared disaster area who suffered uninsured or unreimbursed disaster-related losses can choose to claim them on either the return for the year the loss occurred, in this instance the 2020 return normally filed next year, or return for the prior year. This means that taxpayers can, if they choose, claim these losses on the 2019 return they are filling out this season. So the 2019 return note usually is due by April, but obviously the deadline has been pushed out at this point in time, so you still have possibly the option of the 2019 return. Obviously the 2020 return, then something that will typically be filed next 2021 by April 15th, unless more weirdness, happens and they keep on extending the deadlines. Back to the text. Be sure to write the appropriate FEMA, F-E-M-A, declaration number on any return claiming a loss. So if this applies to you, then you want to basically just scroll, write it up there and say, hey, this is a FEMA, F-E-M-A declaration number, and let them know about that. The numbers are 4536 for Mississippi, 4541 for Tennessee, and 4542 for South Carolina. See publication 547 for details. There's a link to that here. The tax relief is part of a coordinated federal response to the damage caused by these storms and is based on local damage assessments by FEMA, F-E-M-A. For information on disaster recovery, visit assistance.gov. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description.